Ever so slightly stressful this morning, but we have power and water, so that's nice.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
We-
So we are live. We're missing John he had to step out for a minute. And I think Greg's going to be joining us shortly too, as far as I know. I wanted just to before we launch into our scheduled programming, which starts at 9:30 with folks from the forest products industry. Just wanted to have a chance for the committee to talk a little bit about S60. We had some initial testimony on that yesterday, and we've got more coming over the next couple of days. I'm gonna suggest that probably there's pretty strong sentiment towards trying to help, trying to set up a fund that would be there in the event of emergencies. Recognizing that if we were to do that, that either we would need to find somewhere to take the money from in the budget or raise more money, which is, those are the two options always when we're and the appropriations committee would be the ones really weighing in on that. But if we felt
Or ways and
strongly,
means if we raise money.
right, yeah. If we felt strongly that this was critical, we would have a stronger case if we were to say, and we think that we should do this funding wise. But in any case, I think what we're really also doing is looking at the bill itself and how we've set this program up. So any thoughts, any reactions thinking back to yesterday on the way it was structured?
At this point, say we came up with it almost looked de minimis, say tax on food, Vermont food that went into this. How does that become a bill? Unlike appropriations where you just add line items. If we were to create a tax, how does that work? Is it a bill? Is it just something somewhere? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly include language in any bill that we pass out. We could include language that would add, a revenue source.
So like one of our.
We do it so rarely.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that it, say like, how would you do that? But, and we could have Ledge Council come in and talk about that.
Chairman Durfee, thank you. One comment is the striking difference of, the forestry sector that we proposed is completely struck out, which I guess I'd go on the record of wanting that to be in the finished bill. If to back up that, probably could have testimony, not from just myself, from other people within the industry would probably be more appropriate.
Yeah.
But I also, with that said, there's a very acute difference between agriculture and forestry in that most forest operations and the logger or the supply chain that's impacted do not own the forest land. So the forest blocks are often 80% Vermont are privately owned. The others are state or federal or other entities like land trusts. So I would guess that they would have a much more, not de minimis, but a more limited need for any kind of relief from this short-term immediate because of the nature of they're wind events that can be devastating to given stands, but they're.
I want to be sure we are hearing what you're saying. If you say they, you mean the landowners in this case would be
Right, well,
less likely to
when
need.
we heard the farmer from Bolton, Richmond yesterday multiple disasters. It's his land, his animals, his
Crop losses.
crop losses. Whereas in the forestry world, you know, the logger, the log trucker, the forester, they make this work, but they don't. Yeah, so anyway, so that's just, that is an anecdotal opinion. I would much prefer to have other people from the profession or industry give us more intel on what percentage, you know, of this fund would really support the forestry sector. And it may be 20%, it may be less, or it could be more. Anyway, those are just insights for my committee to,
Okay, good.
our committee.
Well,
to ponder.
tomorrow morning at 9, Forest Parks, so not practitioners, but Forest Parks is going to come in on to talk to us about that, at least from their perspective. So, yeah, just for a half hour. So it'll be sort of introductory. And then if the committee wants, we can hear more next week from other folks who are actually in the industry on that question. Richard?
Jed, S60 didn't strike the forest language. It never had it. Whereas
Understood.
our 229, is it 229?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had it in because we have forestry in our title. I don't think they would be opposed to it being added back in. They might say, hey, great catch. On the fire as a part of the insurance or, call it insurance or disaster relief or whatever you want. In forestry, and I hadn't thought about you own 500 acres and you have a straight line wind come through and it takes 20 acres and just turns it right into dominoes. I hadn't thought of that yet. What I was thinking, and that's a concern. What I was thinking was you're doing a job and you have one of those microbursts happen or a July 9th, 10th happen. And you lose some skidder roads and you lose your landing and you get that washouts like that you gotta go in to fix. Could it be used to mitigate that sort of stuff?
Absolutely.
And this is why, like in the right to farm bill, you gotta protect trespass. Because when you get those rain events, that water's going downhill. And it's not stopping until it hits the river. And then the lake.
So some of the parallels too, Jed, is, was it last year, or the year before, when we were talking, when the loggers couldn't get on land for so much of the year, so they lost workable days. And right, and in a sort of bigger sense, that was extreme weather creating that almost, the parallel would be, say, to a drought. It's not a drought after 3 days, but if you had 2 months in Addison County without rain, that would probably be considered extreme weather. You have crop loss and lose workable days.
You realize.
So once you can't get on your fields.
The rest of us are real soil survive, but Addison County doesn't. Yeah, I agree.
So there's a parallel there to sort of loggers as far as lost workable days because of extreme weather or extreme or climate change in some ways.
I thank you. That's a good point. And clearly, I say I used to log 11 months a year and now it's down to 4 or 5. But a year ago and 2 years ago, it was down to, let's say 100 days, 105 days of workable and still be environmentally responsible as far as the soil.
Right. And we had a bill even.
We're gonna try here this year, Jed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it passed ultimately, but there was a logger sort of relief bill.
We did put money in the last year in the budget that did pass. It wasn't relief, it was,
It was a pilot program being stood up by FPR for resiliency investments in hardening landings.
But I remember, I think
Culvert.
Sam Lincoln or somebody was
Yeah.
came in and testified that loggers should get some
Some relief, yeah.
Never
And
happened.
I'm not sure it even ever made it to a bill. But I think what we're going to hear tomorrow morning from FPR is some of the data that they collected on, I think in 2023, maybe also last year, on who, what losses there were. So that will be, sort of a starting point, I think, in thinking about this. You had a hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say there was a similar bill to this that was in the last biennium. And I remember bugging David about it on a regular basis. And he was like, great idea, don't have the money. And I kind of feel like that's where we're going to be again, very likely. And I think that it's so important. I mean, that what we heard yesterday about this farmer, we're going to lose farms if we aren't able to help some of the farmers sustain. And we also heard yesterday that there aren't that many foresters that are impacted in the same way. And so if we're trying to focus the funds so that we're helping those most in dire need of going out of business, it feels to me, while there are reasons to include forestry in terms of actually making a smaller population that we're going to be distributing funds to, it really might make sense to just keep it for agricultural purposes. That would be my 2 cents. The other thing is, I think if we don't come up with a way to raise revenue to cover it, we're again going to have no chance. I mean, we know it's so hard to get funds for anything in this climate. And I mean, one of them that I'm thinking of, and this would probably have to be kind of like tag team, like we would start with us. And then, I mean, obviously we go to Ways and Means if we're going to add a revenue. But I mean, I know for years I've been hearing about sugary drink tax, and it's not necessarily related to farms, but it's something that might make sense. It might make sense. Other states have done it. Should we do that and then designate the funds to go into an emergency relief? Maybe. I mean, unless somebody else has another, I don't think doing a general food tax, I think would be a terrible idea. Sugary drinks feels different to me, or maybe even sugary drinks and candy bars or something. I don't know how you delineate what would be appropriate, but so those would be my 2 thoughts. I would prefer to keep it to agriculture. And I think we probably, if it's going to have a chance of getting funded, we need to find some funds for it.
Sure.
I think we already have a sugary drink tax, don't we?
Yeah, we have on carbonated sodas, there's an
Yeah.
extra tax.
Yeah, and sodas.
Did we pass that?
Uncarbonated?
Carbonated.
Oh, carbonated.
About 5.
And so when,
I think that's just the bottles. That's just the bottle. Yeah.
so I'm just gonna throw something out there, and I'm gonna roll further away from Jed. If you talk about if you fund this to cover the loggers. Now, again, if they get a repair, damage done, I'm all in favor of that. But if you you talk about loggers only can be in the woods for so long, and yes, it's horrendous. And we're gonna have a dry year this year. You're gonna be sweating this summer cutting trees. But are you gonna fund the custom harvest operators that can't go chop 300-400 acres of corn because the river took it out? So it's the same type of deal, they're not gonna fund me. They're not gonna fund Fred's Plumbing and Heating for the diesel fuel he didn't sell me because I chopped 400 acres less corn. But when you have damage done, that erosion and log landings and, it's that in the forestry world. And I hadn't thought of the microburst, and you got a nice stand of hardwood or softwood, and, try to get in for a salvage cut. Unless it's on Vermont State Parks and Forest land and Amy Sheldon says we can't go in and fix that stuff.
Right, well,
I just have a technical question. If there's a bill like this, say we added forest economy element to it here to the Senate bill, right?
Yeah.
Would it go to a conference committee or would potentially Senate natural then say we get jurisdiction of it at some point? Because it now includes forestry.
I think that it would, they would have that option. Yeah, they would have internal conversations, but yes, in theory it could. And that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, I don't think.
No, I'm just wondering how that works
Yeah,
when instead of just a straight conference, if something's added to a bill that might have jurisdiction in another committee.
Yeah.
Even House environment. Right?
yeah. And if there were, if there was a disagreement, then good morning. If there was a disagreement, then we might end up in conference, or we might just end up, amending it and sending it back.
Chairman Durfee. I have heard that, and I don't know who left the barn first, if 229 was launched before, was it S60. But I was told that I recall that forestry was in it initially and was struck out. There was, I don't know how you, and this is politics, and I don't really care, but it'd be nice to know if you could ask leadership, did you ever consider this? Or was it discussed and removed, or it never?
You can ask Michael Grady, he can talk to you about it. He talked to me about it yesterday.
Okay.
Amy Schellenberger for the record. So Senator Hardy was a sponsor on the Senate side, Rep. Burke on the House side. And they actually discussed it between themselves. They had the same language to start with, but Senator Hardy decided not to include forestry in the bill as introduced. Mostly because she thought it would move through the Senate more easily. And they talked together and decided Rep. Burke would include the forestry language so that when it got here, you would know that that was something that would be important to consider in your committee. And I know that NOFA, when they were crafting, the suggested language included the forestry aspects from their coalition. But I think it was just a strategic decision on the way the bills move through the Senate more than anything.
Thank you. Next.
But I think we'll leave this conversation there for now. And Sidonia, if you can just take us off live while we get the next group of people in organized.